Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
So, hey, if anybody wants to call in, 347-989-1012. That is the new number to call in. Well, it's the old new number, 347-989-1012. And you just got to press 1 because we do get a lot of people who listen in on the phone lines as well. And I won't know you want on unless you press that 1. Then your little hand goes up, and I know you're trying to get my attention. So that's how you'll call in. Or you could use Skype, and you can find out how to do that over on latenightinthemidlands.com. Just ask in the chat room so I don't make any more mistakes trying to explain it to you. I'm Michael Vera. This is Late Night in the Midlands. My guest, Stan Gordon. We're talking about UFOs and mysterious creatures. And this is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera. My guest, Stan Gordon. UFOs and mysterious creatures is the conversation tonight. And, I'm kind of loving this myself. And, that was REM, Losing My Religion. I'm not one for the organized religion. I think, God's great, and, you should definitely bring them as close to your heart as you can. But, as far as the religion stuff, I don't do much of that. I mean, to each their own. If you do, that's great. I have nothing against the church. I just don't do that myself. I used to, but I don't know. I've got a good relationship with God myself, and I don't need a middleman. That's just always how I felt about it. Maybe you feel different, but that's not the topic tonight, so I won't even go there, even though I just did. Stan Gordon, UFOs, Mysterious Creatures. The call-in number is 347-989-1012. Again, 347-989-1012. Press 1 so we know you want to get on. You can call in using Skype as well. So let's get back to it here and bring Stan back on with us. And Stan, another great story you got for us. Let's hear it.
Yes. Before we get into it, I'd like to remind your readers that if they want to get updates on reports here in Pennsylvania and look at some of these reports, they can get on my website, which is stangordon.info, I-N-F-O. And also I want to mention there's some interesting upcoming events that people may want to attend. Some really interesting conferences coming up, and I'll be speaking at some of these. This weekend we have the Big Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, September 15th and 16th. And then September 29th and 30th, we have the 2012 MUFON Philadelphia UFO Conference, which will have some big-name investigators there. And then on October 13th and 14th, we have the Pittsburgh MUFON Conference, and I'll also be speaking there as well. And there's other events on my website, so they can go to my website and get more information on these events. And we're trying to get my site updated fairly often as reports are coming in. So they may want to check my website out to find out the latest details. But another interesting case has been this strange winged humanoid report that I started investigating last year. And the first report I got was March 18th. This is up Butler County, north of Pittsburgh, and I've interviewed the witness many times. The guy's is a very good background. We were able to check him out. He's a businessman, and he was traveling between the towns of Chicora and East Brady in the early morning hours of March 18th. And he said this was the freakiest thing he'd ever seen, and it made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. But he said he was riding down the road that night, and about a quarter mile away, he observed something on the right side in the grassy area. And he first thought this was a deer, and he stepped on the gas to move closer to get a better view, and about 50 yards away, he observed something that appeared to be hunched down and then stood up. And then he observed this very tall, muscular creature. And he said that the high beams of his vehicle hit the creature, and he watched as it walked in front of one of those big yellow reflective road signs. So he got a really good look at this thing as it crossed the 2-lane road in 3 long steps and continued into the woods. And he said what he saw, and he made it clear to me. He said, I've heard people say they've seen Bigfoot around here. He said, this was not a Bigfoot. He said it was at least 8 foot tall, but it had smooth, leather-like skin, but was either dark tan or light brown in color. And the creature never looked at him. He only saw it from the side, And he said the head appeared to be flat in the front section, then rounded out. He said the top part of the skull was like an aerodynamic helmet, and the top was not quite a point, but looked like a ridge on top of the head. The face was flat, and the eyes were not clearly defined, but the man thought that they may have been pointed in the corner. The ear was observed on the left side, was long and flat, and came up and back, was pointed backwards like a flap. The arms were very muscular and a little longer than that of a human. The hands looked more like claws, but the number of fingers were unclear. And he said one of the physical traits that stood out was it had extremely muscular legs. And he said it was hard to explain, but the legs did not move like that of a human, and they looked like they bent backwards. And he said what appeared to be wings on its back were tucked into its body, with the wingtips extending towards the side of its head. He said there was no unusual sound or smell. We watched the thing for 7 to 8 minutes, and as he approached the area where the creature had walked in the woods, he slowed down, but he could no longer see it. He went back to the site the next day to look for tracks, but the ground wasn't very good. There was no tracks there, but he measured the height of the sign. It was a little over 8 foot tall. So this thing was about 8 foot 4 inches tall from what he could tell. Now, that's really interesting, and the reason it's interesting is because there's a local group up in that area. It's called the BORU, it's the Butler Organization of Research on the Unexplained, and it's headed by a fellow named Dan Hagman. And Dan received other independent reports around the same time from other people. And I've got a few of the summaries of those reports from Dan. March 26th, near Kepler's Corner in Butler County, 2 witnesses were driving to Butler when they witnessed a dark tan, 8 foot tall winged entity. The face appeared to be smashed in. It had a muscular body and a head that went to a point. The arms were long and appeared to have claws for fingers. When across the road, it seemed to lope with each stride. The witnesses stopped the car in shock and sat there until another car came by and they had to move. The witnesses wanted to take a lie detector test to prove what he saw. Another case up in that same area where the first report happened, a witness was riding in his motorcycle 2 miles past a custard stand and saw a large animal. It was bent over as if looking for something. As it got within 75 feet of it, it stood up. It was at least 8 to 9 feet tall. The arms hung down below its knees. The skin looked like leather, and it was very dark. Its eyes were swept up in the corners, and it had a pointed head. It was very muscular, looked like it had wings on the side of its head. It also appeared angry. The creature then bolted into the woods. The witness said, if anything, it was like straight out of hell and needed to go back. March 2011 near Reimersburg. 2 witnesses that left the ice cream stand headed for Reimersburg does something crossing the road. They came to within 35 feet of the creature. Said it was at least 9 foot tall, dark brown skin, long arms, and broad shoulders. Had a pointed head, flat forehead, and pointed ears, and what appeared to be wings on its back. The body was extremely muscular, and there were 4 finger-like claws on each hand. The eyes were squinted but swept upwards at the corners. As the creature turned the whole body, it would turn. The movement of the arms were not normal. The mouth looked like a slit. The wings looked like see-through mesh and resembled wings on a bat. The claws were black as coal. The witness said this thing was straight from hell. So just really interesting reports from different people in the same area.
Those are very interesting. Now, what about mini UFOs? What are mini UFOs? And I've heard a little bit about those. Are those like, could they be like drones? Maybe an ET drone or I don't know. Are there many people in these things? I know it sounds kind of crazy.
When we first started the program, we talked about that small sphere that entered that vehicle.
Right.
And I've looked into these cases since the 60s, late 60s. I've had reports on these spheres. These spheres range anywhere from a few inches to about a foot in diameter. And I've had cases of them entering people's homes, entering cars with the windows down, hovering low over people. I had a case years and years ago on a golf course where one of these little spheres was kind of playing games with the golfers. It would just be bobbing up and down above their head, and they were swinging their golf clubs at these things, and it kept going in and out of range, and they could never hit it. One really intriguing case from many, many years ago from up in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, where a woman told me one of these little spheres came into her kitchen through an open window, was floating around the kitchen. She grabbed a broom, she said, and struck it, And she said when she struck it broke into two similar spheres, and they floated around and went back out the window and disappeared. So these little spheres, and while most of them are round, and within the last 10 years, I've had some reports of very small, like little cigar-shaped objects pursuing cars and being seen are very small as well. So, and we've had other cases of some people describe them like little fireflies that have hovered like over bushes and trees in people's yards. So these are really intriguing cases. And, you know, there's a lot of reports historically with some of the alleged abduction cases, with abductees reporting some type of small spherical globes of light as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the abductions. How many of those have you dealt with, and what do we know about this? I mean, you know, I wonder nowadays if some of this could be our own government, but obviously that don't explain, you know, way back when.
Oh, yeah. I mean, these reports are going back many, many years, long before we had the technologies we're looking at today with some of these drone capabilities. And I would think it'd be highly unlikely that even in these situations that the government would probably float these things inside of people's homes and cars and have the chance of one of these things breaking down and being recovered. It just doesn't make sense. Just like with all these triangular UFO reports, and of course there's a lot of theories that some of these may well be our own experimental aircraft, and I think that is a possibility, but they have the restricted airspace in different parts of the country where they have 100 miles of airspace to test these type of vehicles. From the reports we've had just in Pennsylvania alone over the years, the large number of sightings over populated areas. I've had sightings on the Pennsylvania Turnpike. There's just too many reports, too low level. It doesn't make any sense that the government would be continually testing these large aircraft, experimental aircraft, over populated areas with the chance of something like that coming down. It just doesn't make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and we know that they're covering it up. You know, they've looked into this. They still are. They, you know, it's just amazing how they cover up so much in this area. Based on your research, if you had to guess, and I guess at this point it would be a guess, why do you think they're here? Could it possibly be that maybe it's us and we left this planet a long time ago and now we're coming back to check on things?
Well, once again, you know, just going by the investigations I've done, like I said, I think the more somebody really takes the time to investigate these cases, I think we're dealing with something that's much more unusual, probably coming from more than one source. We may not be dealing with all the same phenomena. It could be certain types of phenomena are somehow interrelated. It's extremely complex. And I think this is one of the reasons why the government is probably not telling us what's going on. My feeling is a couple of things. One, it's an international phenomena. These sightings go on week after week around the country and around the world, and there's nothing any of the governments can do about it. But I think the main thing is that they probably don't have all the answers themselves of what's going on, and they're not in control of what's happening. And there's little they can do about it. And at least that's my feeling of what might be happening. But, again, I said it's very complex. And the reason I'll say that is because of the various cases we've had over the years. And just to give you a couple examples, we've had incidents of what appear to be solid craft that physically change one form into another. Other instances where they would just suddenly appear and disappear. We've had a few instances over the years where, for example, we had a group of people, and only a couple people within that group could clearly see this object hovering close by, and the other people couldn't see it. You know, and this brings up certain questions. You know, is it possible that certain people are able to perceive this phenomena or certain aspects of the phenomena that other people can't? Could the phenomena be attracted to certain people? I mean, there's a lot of things here we just don't have the answers for.
Absolutely. I can agree with that. Now, what about Men in Black? You know, how many reports have you gotten on the Men in Black, and how often do they show up, you know, for people who might know too much? I mean, how many reports do you get on those?
Well, actually, in both both of my books, Real and Mysterious Pennsylvania and the Silent Invasion book, I get into some really interesting incidents that we've investigated where and I can't say the men in black because they weren't always the men in black, but mysterious people were involved in some situations, especially during that wave of 73 and 74. I'll give you an example. As you recall, we talked about that incident October 25th of 73 outside of Uniontown of the UFO landing and the two creatures in the field. Well, the primary witness, we kept in touch with him for years and years after the event because a lot of very odd things were happening. I mean, here was a person who was a complete non-believer, used to laugh at people about these stories, and then he found himself being a key person, involved in a situation like this. And over a period of time after the event happened, and he's not the only one, he began to have various type of paranormal experiences, things he didn't want to happen, like premonitions of events that are about to take place that he knew about it before they occurred and told people about it. And we were in touch with him for many years. And Dr. Berthold Schwartz, the late Dr. Schwartz, was a famous psychiatrist, and he came in and spent a week here after the incident investigating the case and interviewing all the people. He wrote up reports on this case and came away convinced that people were telling the truth about what happened. And because of certain aspects of the case, we never hypnotized the subject, nor did Dr. Schwartz. And that was it. We left it alone. And many, many years later, when we were interviewing the witness again, and the situation had changed a little, we just thought of the possibility at that point of possibly using hypnosis. And when we questioned him about it, he looked at us pretty funny. Myself and my assistant was with me, George, and he said, "Well, why do you want to hypnotize me again?" He said, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "Don't you remember when your people came and hypnotized me?" And we said, "What are you talking about?" So he goes on to relay this interesting story that a week or so after the incident happened. Now, we had interviewed him many, many times, and I was up there, and we did multiple interviews and follow-up investigations after that incident happened. And it was one of those times that all these years he thought that whoever these two men were, they were part of my research group. And he told me about how about a week later, during one of these times, two men came to this home, one in an Air Force uniform and one in a man in a dress suit. And they came there to interview him about what he had seen with the creatures in the field and the UFO. And one of those people had a briefcase with him. And in that briefcase, he had photographs of UFOs and Bigfoot. And I remember him telling me one of the pictures was of a Bigfoot climbing over a fence, carrying a dead pig under its arm. And I believe, from the top of my head, I believe it was from Georgia. I'll have to read my notes. And they wanted him to point out what pictures of the UFOs and Bigfoot looked similar to what he saw. And also at that point, apparently they did hypnotize him. And they told him that, they were going to follow up with him and they would get back to him again. And he never heard from those fellows again. And, of course, I filed, the Air Force was officially out of UFO investigations in January of 1970s when they really closed down Project Blue Book. So by 1973, the Air Force, our government, was not officially, at least on a public level, investigating UFO cases. But we tried to see if there was any records of that, and, of course, we found nothing. So who these fellows were, we have no idea. And so that's just one of a number of instances that showed up during this wave of reports. I can also tell you that all my phones, I had two phones in the house during this massive wave of reports in 73 and 74 in our command center where all the reports came in and where our communications was going on. And the phones were just overwhelmed day and night with calls. In fact, and a couple times, both of our phone lines went out of order because the overload of calls coming in. The phone company was just amazed. They'd never seen anything like it before. And we had people manning here the communications and phones in my home 24 hours a day while this was going on. But on this one particular day, I got a phone call from a man who indicated that he worked for the government, that he was aware of the investigations we were doing on the Bigfoot sightings, and he gave me a name of a contact, a name of a government agency in Washington, D.C. He gave me the address and a phone number that in the event that we came up with a body or any really, really good solid proof that I was to call that number and go from there. But unfortunately, that never did occur. But we were able to confirm later through another source that was an official phone line that we were given. And so a lot of intriguing things happened. And over the years, I've had other instances with UFOs, and going back to the Kecksburg case, actually, from what we know now, that there were men in dress suits at the scene that night that were apparently there among the military, and some witnesses said that these men in the suits seemed to be giving the military the orders of what to do. So there's some fascinating stories out there, and who these people are, we just really don't know.
Well, I had to laugh. One of my listeners in the chat asked if there was ever any cases of any women in black, and I don't know. You know, I've heard cases of these things. Some think that they're mechanical or half mechanical, half human, and I've heard that about the Greys as well. So, you know, who knows? But no cases of women in black, right? I've never heard of it.
I've never had any, and I can't verify this, but going from memory, it seems like during the investigation, I think it was the Mothman case, some of the cases in West Virginia back in the 60s, that there were supposedly, I think, some women involved in those cases, but I can't swear to it.
How much do you put into the, I hear this a lot from some, so I thought I'd ask, how much do you put into the fallen angel theory when it comes to aliens?
Well, you know, like I said, I don't have the answers to what's going on. I keep an open mind to all possibilities, and I've had, over the years, especially after I started publishing information back in the 70s about some of my findings with the Bigfoot phenomenon, and the fact that we might be dealing with something that, for a better term, may not be a normal flesh and blood animal, may be interdimensional. And I had various religious leaders from around the country contact me and, you know, felt that there was something connected with that. And, you know, who am I to say who's right and who's wrong? All I do is gather the information, try to find some answers, and I surely don't have all the answers.
And that's what I like about people like yourself, is that you keep an open mind. You understand that you don't have the complete answers that we're all looking for, so you don't make a judgment on it. You basically say, you know, I don't know, and we're trying to find out. And I respect that completely, because there's some people who come right out and say, no, doesn't matter what you say, this is what it is. And really,
well, you know,
I mean,
the whole situation, especially with the Bigfoot phenomenon and the weird incidents that we had, and, you know, I didn't go out looking for these cases. These were the cases that we investigated. This is what the evidence showed. And, you know, these weren't instances that happened years and months later, somebody followed up on. I mean, we were there right after they happened. The data was fresh. The witnesses' memories were clear. The evidence was seen. You know, the animal reactions were observed. This was well-documented incidents that were very strange and unusual. And, you know, I realized when I started writing this information and over the years that there was skepticism, because even today, those involved in the UFO research, a lot of people in UFO research, you know, they're convinced we're dealing strictly with extraterrestrial spacecraft, and who am I to say that some of these are not, but they don't want to connect UFO sightings with Bigfoot. And people involved with Bigfoot investigations, they don't like to connect the fact that Bigfoot and UFOs have been seen together. The point is, whether we like it or not, there's a small percentage of cases that seem to show that both UFOs and Bigfoot have been seen together, and I know without any doubt, I've talked to many Bigfoot researchers who've been out in the field over the years and have seen strange lights and strange little spheres and all kind of weird things, and a lot of these people, even today, don't want to publicly talk about it themselves because they're afraid of ridicule from their peers. And my feeling is, from the reports that I've gotten from throughout the world from other researchers, there may well be a lot more to this information. There may be a lot more data out there, but because of the ridicule, a lot of people are not forthcoming. And I wrote the Silent Invasion book to try to encourage other investigators to keep an open mind and to look at these reports. And I know in more recent years that there are other reports out there. These things are ongoing. But also, if you notice the last few years, you're seeing more and more even like some of the older UFO experts who were very close-minded to the paranormal being associated with some of these UFO cases and strange creature reports, and more is beginning to slowly appear. And I've been getting really good responses just in general, like from the book and different places I've lectured around the country. I spoke out at the McMinnville, Oregon UFO Festival last year, right in the middle of Bigfoot country, and I gave a lecture on this topic. And I figured, well, I'm surely going to get a lot of heat out here because people are not going to accept what I'm saying. And I had an amazing positive response. I had many key Bigfoot experts from that area that contacted me afterwards and said, you know, what you told us about, the same things have been happening out here for years, but everybody kept their mouth shut because they're afraid of being laughed at. So I think we're dealing with something that's probably much more common than people realize, and hopefully we'll begin to open these doors up for people to exchange this information.
Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather. Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
So, hey, if anybody wants to call in, 347-989-1012. That is the new number to call in. Well, it's the old new number, 347-989-1012. And you just got to press 1 because we do get a lot of people who listen in on the phone lines as well. And I won't know you want on unless you press that 1. Then your little hand goes up, and I know you're trying to get my attention. So that's how you'll call in. Or you could use Skype, and you can find out how to do that over on latenightinthemidlands.com. Just ask in the chat room so I don't make any more mistakes trying to explain it to you. I'm Michael Vera. This is Late Night in the Midlands. My guest, Stan Gordon. We're talking about UFOs and mysterious creatures. And this is Late Night in the Midlands. I'm Michael Vera. My guest, Stan Gordon, UFOs and mysterious...
East Brady in the early morning hours of March 18th. And he said this was the freakiest thing he'd ever seen, and it made the hair stand up on the back of his neck. But he said he was riding down the road that night, and about a quarter mile away, he observed something on the right side in the grassy area. And he first thought this was a deer, and he stepped on the gas to move closer to get a better view, and about 50 yards away, he observed something that appeared to be hunched down and then stood up. And then he observed this very tall, muscular creature. And he said that the high beams of his vehicle hit the creature, and he watched as it walked in front of one of those big yellow reflective road signs. So he got a really good look at this thing as it crossed the 2-lane road and 3 long steps and continued into the woods. And he said what he saw, and he made it clear to me. He said, I've heard people say they've seen Bigfoot around here. He said, this was not a Bigfoot. He said it was a lead name investigators there. And then on October 13th and 14th, we have the Pittsburgh MUFON Conference, and I'll also be speaking there as well. And there's other events on my website, so they can go to my website and get more information on these events. And we're trying to get my site updated fairly often as reports are coming in. So they may want to check my website out to find out the latest details. But another interesting case has been this strange winged humanoid report that I started investigating last year. And the first report I got was March 18th. This is up Butler County, north of Pittsburgh. And I've interviewed the witness many times. The guy's is a very good background. We were able to check him out. He's a businessman. And he was traveling between the towns of Chicora.
347-989-1012. Press 1 so we know you want to get on. You can call in using Skype as well. So let's get back to it here and bring Stan back on with us. And Stan, another great story you got for us. Let's hear it.
Yes, Before we get into it, I'd like to remind your readers that if they want to get updates on reports here in Pennsylvania and look at some of these reports, they can get on my website, which is stangordon.info, I-N-F-O. And also I want to mention there's some interesting upcoming events that people may want to attend. Some really interesting conferences coming up, and I'll be speaking at some of these. This weekend we have the Big Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, September 15th and 16th. And then September 29th and 30th, we have the 2012 MUFON Philadelphia UFO Conference, which will have some big
creatures is the conversation tonight. And, I'm kind of loving this myself. And, that was REM, Losing My Religion. I'm not one for the organized religion. I think, God's great, and, you should definitely bring them as close to your heart as you can. But, as far as the religion stuff, I don't do much of that. I mean, to each their own. If you do, that's great. I have nothing against the church. I just don't do that myself. I used to. But I don't know. I've got a good relationship with God myself, and I don't need a middleman. That's just always how I felt about it. Maybe you feel different, but that's not the topic tonight, so I won't even go there, even though I just did. Stan Gordon, UFOs, Mysterious Creatures. The call-in number is 347-989-1012. Again,